more than 100 years, the University of North Dakota has been known as a place of excellence in the academic world. Students from across the nation gathered here to learn the skills needed to become an engineer, teacher, or other professional. But in a setting where molding young minds was the main mission, the University of North Dakota was recognized throughout the nation for creating something different altogether. The school became known for transforming lumps of clay into beautiful pieces of pottery. In many ways, the story of UND Pottery is tied to the history of North Dakota. Hardworking, dedicated people overcame overwhelming odds to create a legacy that lives on today. UND's journey to gaining prominence in the world of pottery began nearly 100 years ago with the creation of the ceramics department. But it wasn't an art instructor who first came up with the idea of UND starting a pottery program. It was a chemist with an interest in geology. In 1910, Earle Babcock was the dean of UND's School of Mines. He was passionate about his work and had been studying North Dakota's mineral resources for 20 years. Much of his spare time was spent riding in a buggy or on his bicycle so he could gather samples for his research.
After he came here in 1890, traveled around the state. This is how he spent his summer vacation, traveling around the state, looking for these natural resource deposits, whether it's coal or lignite or clays or whatever, but certainly those were the two major resources, natural resources that he was looking for. I believe in 1892 he published a small pamphlet on North Dakota clays. And one must also remember that Babcock was hired as a professor of chemistry. He was hired as a professor of geology. He was a state geologist from 1894 to 1902. The very first North Dakota State Geological Survey report came out just before the end of his tenure in 1902. It was published in 1901, and certainly that very first North Dakota Geological Survey addressed all of Babcock's work and findings of natural resources in the western part of the state.
Babcock's research revealed something that he hoped would be a boon to the state of North Dakota.
In looking at the minerals of this state, he discovered that there was a very high, a clay of a very high degree of quality, and that he collected samples, took them back to the university, analyzed them and experimented with them to see what the potential would be as far as ceramic manufacture, with the hope that in time perhaps a ceramic industry might be developed to rival those in Ohio and New Jersey. So having discovered that the clays were highly suitable for ceramic manufacture, he set about promoting this use, and he did that by first exhibiting pieces that he had made from North Dakota clay, exhibiting them at the 1904 World's Fair in St. Louis. That was successful. Then he later had more pieces made of North Dakota clay and had those exhibited at the National Corn Exposition in Nebraska, Omaha, Nebraska in 1909. After the success of both of these exposures, he was able to convince the university that a ceramic department should be established.
And to head the new department, Babcock had someone very special in mind, Margaret Kelly Cable. At the time, Margaret Cable taught at the Handicraft Guild in Minneapolis, the same place she learned her craft. Earle Babcock gave Cable a clear mandate: show others that North Dakota clay could be used to make ceramics. He hoped it would lead to the development of a ceramics industry in the state. The ceramics department was set up at the School of Mines, which was later named Babcock Hall in honor of Earle Babcock. There, Margaret Cable began testing and researching the clay and its possible industrial uses, while at the same time instructing students in the art of making pottery.
She came here as a very young, energetic, enthusiastic, very hard-working individual that had had a pretty good background in research as well as the making of art pottery as such. Once she came here, and with her charge of actually doing additional research, With that in mind, she went away and took classes at Alfred University, which at the time was the preeminent school for ceramics in the United States, with Charles Benz, who was out there as the chair of the ceramics department at Alfred. She went back to some of the eastern potteries where her folks had been from in Ohio, from the Buckeye State there, and did some additional studying there in the whiteware factories, and came back and brought all of that information and all of that interest and all of that experience here to the University of North Dakota as well.
During this time, there was growing interest among women to learn new skills and crafts. Many became attracted to the art of pottery making, so Cable decided to open up her classes to others on campus and beyond.
The classes at the university in the ceramics department were not only available to students of the university, but were also available to family members of faculty, and also open to townspeople of Grand Forks and later to the surrounding area. The idea being that the more hands they had making and decorating pottery, the more success they would have in promoting the use of the clays. So a lot of the pieces that you find between 1910 and say the early 1960s are pieces made by older adult students who were referred to as special students. The special classes were popular because they were populated mainly by women. As I say, initially they were wives and daughters of faculty members of the university. And then obviously the townswomen were attracted to it too. It was a creative outlet for women of the town with available time who didn't want to continue with embroidery or needlework or sketching or watercolor or any of the other handicrafts which had been popular up to that time.
It was quite popular in those days that the women that lived in Grand Forks, and especially the university professors' wives, they all seemed to start at the university, and I don't know how I got going, but anyway, I was invited to come along with my friend Ruth Montgomery, and we worked together for a good many years.
Margaret Cable was not just a gifted potter, but also a very effective teacher. Through her unique teaching style, she was able to pass on her love and passion for pottery to her students.
She had an ability to energize students and draw students to her. She was, by many people's estimation, a very vigorous instructor. And she would critique and evaluate pottery pretty rigorously.
You had to do it the way she wanted you to do it. You had to be a little careful with what you were doing, and if you made a mistake, then you had to throw it out and start over.
But nonetheless, she was also that she had a kindness and a warmth and a quick wit that drew people to her.
I never saw Miss Cable touchy or irritable or quarrelsome, or she was just even-tempered and always pleasant.
She was a wonderful storyteller. She would weave biblical passages, and she would weave things from Wordsworth into her teaching and into her lectures and into her demonstrations.
Cable faithfully carried out the mission she had been given, but in the process, she did a lot more than just show that North Dakota clay could make good pottery. She helped spark an artistic explosion. She taught her students a wide variety of styles and techniques. She showed them how to use appealing combinations of colors and designs. The result was pottery that rivaled the work of the best American producers at that time. And there was something else that made North Dakota pottery unique.
The popularity of North Dakota pottery was its appealing to images that were regionally very, very interesting. The early days, the teens, were years when the arts and crafts movement had a very big influence on the images that were used on pottery. In the late teens and 20s, throughout the United States, and these were influences on Margaret Cable, were the development of regional imagery. And the pasque flower, the prairie rose, the flicker tail, which was the mascot here at the university at the time, images in wheat, Conestoga wagons, the whole prairie frontier kind of imagery that was used were extremely popular.
Besides the unique imagery, there was another characteristic that linked each pot to Cable and her students. Nearly every piece bears the distinctive seal of UND's School of Mines. This let the owner of the pottery know the origin of the piece. Cable actively promoted pottery outside of the classroom. She wrote articles for the Journal of the American Ceramics Society, and she spent a lot of time traveling and spreading the word about North Dakota clay.
Cable demonstrated on the wheel, on the potter's wheel, extensively around the state of North Dakota. In fact, it got to the point, she was invited to so many different places that it got to the point where she simply could not go. It took away too much from her teaching time and from her research time, that she developed a series of photographs that were connected with, or that were illustrations for a text that she developed. Remember, Cable was at her prime in the late teens, 20s, and early 30s. And it was during that time that the women's movements, women's suffrage, all kind of came of age as well. And there were numerous women's federations around the United States, but even in North Dakota, there were an extensive network of women's federations. And they were always interested in having women demonstrate, women be a part of this process. And so she developed this, this text along with these visual aids that she had that could be sent out there and were very, very useful. There were 12, if you can believe that, 12 sets of those put together in the state of North Dakota that she would send out at various times. They'd be checked out like library books to various places.
Cable's talents in research, teaching, and outreach, along with her artistic ability, were noticed by leaders throughout the nation. In recognition of Cable's growing visibility and because of his own fondness for UND pottery, North Dakota's Governor, Arthur Sorley, asked her to create a very special vase.
Governor Sorley was an avid supporter of the University of North Dakota Ceramics Department and Margaret Cable. His wife and Margaret were very good friends. She spent much time in the governor's home in Bismarck. And knew the family very well. He had asked her to do a vase that year, which is known as the North Dakota Products Vase. He knew of her ability and asked her to do a vase that had 19 different products on it. The list is so extensive that it becomes almost hilarious that you're going to try and put images of that many products on one vase.
The motifs used in the decoration are all indigenous to the state. So basically it is wheat, corn, flax, sweet clover, the cattle industry, sheep, hogs, honeybees for the honey industry, the flicker tail or gopher as a state animal. These were all motifs that were important local phenomena for the state of North Dakota.
Cable's achievements led to additional recognition. In 1927, Governor Sorley named Cable North Dakota's Woman of the Year. But Cable was not alone in making UND ceramics successful. The department's mission was supported by the knowledge, expertise, and talents of both the faculty and staff members during her years at UND.
Besides the students, of course, there was Julia Matson, who was an early student of Margaret Cable's and later became an instructor in 1926, 27. There was Hildegard Fried, who became the Hildegard Fried Dreps after she was married in the early 20s. She was a research person and primarily charged with developing clays and glazes for the ceramics department in the teens and early 20s here at the university. There was Flora Huckfield, who was Margaret Cable's widowed sister, who came and worked in the ceramics department and was charged with the production of pottery for sales here at the university. And she did not do any teaching as such, she just made pottery for sale. Later, there was Frida Hammers. She was an excellent technician. Didn't do as much with actually the making of pottery as Hildegard Fried did. Hildegard Fried made beautiful pottery as well as being an excellent researcher. But Hammers was one that was just top-notch as a researcher with clays and glazes.
By the end of 1927, Cable had saved up enough money to build her own house near campus. She lived there with her mother, her sister, Flora Huckfield, and later with her young nephew, Charles. Cable put her own touches into the house, including surrounding the fireplace with her handmade decorative tiles. The images included scenic landscapes and even a portrayal of her nephew and his dog. Despite her busy schedule, owning her own home and sharing it with her family must have been a rewarding time for Cable. But unforeseen events would soon radically change Cable's personal and professional life. In 1929, Cable's mother, Josephine, passed away, and by the early 1930s, the Great Depression had deepened. Its effects on the university were becoming more severe.
The 1933-1935 budget was really only 45% of the 1931 budget. So faculty and staff salaries were reduced. There were forced leaves of absences. There were dismissals, although there weren't as many dismissals as one would think. I think there were only 17 dismissals. But with almost a 50% cut, there was almost a total elimination of purchasing power for supplies, for equipment.
Financial support for ceramics was dwindling. Cable's salary was cut, and then funding for the ceramics department was eliminated. Cable was forced to sell her home and move back into the same apartment she had left behind. The home she had worked for so long was gone. In addition to her personal losses, Cable had to cope with the struggles of the ceramics department. The survival of UND Pottery was at stake. By 1935, the department was required to earn all of its income through the sale of pottery. During this time period, Cable realized she had to devise something new to attract buyers. The answer was bentonite pottery.
As the salary line that was supplemented by the sale of pottery, the equipment line that was supplemented by the sale of pottery, all of those numbers, as they started to decline a little bit, Margaret thought, I need to come up with a new gimmick sort of thing, a new line of pottery. And so she was already using North Dakota clay for the basic making of the pottery. And she went out and used or dug some clay that could be used as part of the glaze. Those of us who know a lot about clay and glazes know that a very, very popular glaze named Albany Slip has been used for many years in the eastern part of the United States on potteries there, and was sold throughout the United States. And I think her idea was to take an idea like that and use some materials from western North Dakota, blend them into some other commercial materials, and make a new expression that was even more uniquely North Dakota, so that the glaze and the clay body were North Dakota.
The new type of pottery was a success, but the challenge before Cable now was to find a way to reach interested buyers.
Margaret Cable decided that the only way that her department could survive is if they put sales on a more professional basis. And to that end, a traveling salesman was recruited by the name of Austin Spencer. And he was responsible for sales basically in a 5-state area of the Dakotas, Minnesota, Iowa, and Nebraska. And he took with him samples of the pottery made at the University of North Dakota, and from those samples he took orders. Now these pieces were slip cast pieces. They were not handcrafted pieces. They were made in molds. So he could sell an example and say, this is what we will send you.
Strictly speaking, the pottery Spencer sold was not handmade, but Cable and her staff made sure each one looked like it was. They carefully cleaned away any mold marks and developed unique shapes, designs, and shaded colors to make each piece special. The plan worked, and the ceramics department was able to make it through those tough years. The pottery program that Cable had worked so hard to establish would live on.
So the ceramics department survived, and they survived by will, they survived by expertise because of their continued experimentation and testing, and they survived because of their creativity and entrepreneurship. That department was going to survive. They did it by whatever means they could.
In 1949, Margaret Cable retired, and with her departure came a distinctive change in the ceramics department. Large-scale production was no longer required, and Austin Spencer's contract was not renewed. A new head of the department stepped in.
When Cable left in 1949, Margaret Paschal was hired, and she was one of these people that she was the beginning of the break with that long tradition that we had here at the university of kind of a corporate body being a part of the expression. She was much more of an individual. When she sent pieces away or had exhibitions, it was of Margaret Paschal's work, not of the University of North Dakota Pottery or the School of Mines. The shift was really a way to an individual expression.
2 years after her retirement, Margaret Cable was presented with the Charles Binns Medal, the most prestigious award in the world of ceramics art. It had been more than 40 years since she had first been given the task to promote North Dakota clay, and little did she know then that she would one day be recognized as one of the biggest names in pottery. The production of art pottery at UND ended in 1963 with the retirement of Julia Matson. The distinctive identifying seal, which had first been introduced 50 years earlier, was discontinued. But University of North Dakota Pottery still lives on. The ceramics program, which first began in the School of Mines, is now part of the art department. And just as Cable did nearly 100 years ago, Professor Don Miller and others continue to produce pottery and to teach their craft and their art to students. Times have changed, but the legacy of Margaret Kelly Cable continues to this day.
I think that one of the things that ceramics has done throughout the years is to make the humanitarians kind of part of that, or humanistic part of that, people having an appreciation for pottery and art that they would not have had otherwise. Margaret Cable taught over 1,800 students while she was here. Now, some of them, Laura Taylor, for example, is one of those people who went out and actually established another pottery. There were any number of students. James Carley, he was one of them that provided us with a very extensive early American stoneware pottery, salt glaze pottery collection as a gift of over 200 pieces. That kind of impact is very, very hard to quantitatively talk about. But the quality of life that that we've given to people, I think, has been enhanced dramatically by the ceramics department.
I think the legacy for the ceramics department then and UND Pottery, I think is found in the pieces themselves and what they represent. Certainly what the pieces that one considers art pottery today are very favored by collectors. But beyond that, they represent Margaret Cable's teaching. They represent her increased technical skill and artistic skill. They represent her tenacity in keeping the ceramics department going. And they represent the achievement of her students in learning. So I think the legacy of the ceramics department is found in those pieces.
No doubt Margaret Kelly Cable would be proud of what she helped start at the University of North Dakota so long ago. Her desire to see ceramics thrive at UND helped her overcome obstacles that to many would seem insurmountable. Her love of pottery is perhaps best summed up in the poem she wrote called The Song of the Pot. I am a lucky little lump of North Dakota clay. My heart is filled with gladness, and I sing a song all day. For a potter found me worthy of his very finest ware, and fashioned me upon his wheel with tender, loving care. With the magic of his fingers gave me form and life and soul, transformed me from a shapeless clod into a flower bowl. And as I hold within my arms a prairie rose bouquet, I bless the hand that made me, all from North Dakota clay.